Empaths are known for kindness, but there is a side almost no one talks about. The same person who understands every emotion in the room, who feels the pain of others as if it is their own, can reach a point where something shifts in a way that feels almost unsettling. Because when an empath turns dark, it is no longer driven by pure emotion. It becomes precise, controlled, intentional, and that is where things start to change in a way most people never expect. An empath does more than read emotions. They absorb them. Every word, every tone, every hidden intention gets processed on a deeper level. This is why people feel safe around them. They listen without judgment. They give without limits. They show up even when they are running on empty. Over time, this constant emotional intake begins to build pressure beneath the surface. Many studies in psychology suggest that individuals with high emotional sensitivity often experience stronger stress responses because they process more emotional data than the average person. That pressure does not always explode outward. Sometimes it transforms. There comes a moment when the empath begins to see patterns. They start noticing how often their energy is taken, how often their kindness is used, how often their silence is misunderstood, and instead of reacting with more empathy, something else takes over. Awareness sharpens, boundaries form, emotions that once overflowed become measured and controlled. This is the part people rarely understand. The shift is quiet, almost invisible, yet it changes everything. In this video, you will learn what really happens during that transformation, the hidden stages that lead an empath from emotional openness to emotional control, the subtle behaviors that signal the shift has already begun, and the truth behind why this version of an empath can feel so intense to those around them. There are lesser-known psychological patterns behind this change that most people overlook, and once you see them, it becomes impossible to unsee. Stay with this video until the end, because the final insight reveals why this transformation is not about becoming cold or heartless, but about survival and power in a world that often misunderstands sensitivity. Welcome to the channel. If this topic speaks to you, and you want more deep insights like this, make sure to subscribe and be part of this journey. The change does not happen in a single moment. It builds slowly, almost invisibly, through layers of emotional weight that keep stacking over time. An empath moves through life, absorbing more than most people realize. Every tense conversation, every hidden frustration, every unspoken sadness gets picked up and carried along. It is never just their own emotions they deal with. They carry pain that is not even theirs, and after a while, it becomes difficult to separate what they feel from what others project onto them. This constant intake creates a kind of emotional overload that does not fade easily. It lingers, grows, and quietly reshapes the way they see people. At the same time, their kindness starts to attract a certain kind of attention. People begin to rely on them in ways that are rarely balanced. Their ability to listen turns into an expectation. Their willingness to help turns into something others assume will always be there. Gradually, respect begins to blur into convenience. People see their kindness as weakness, even if they never say it out loud. They ask for more, take more, and give less in return. The empath notices it, but instead of confronting it, they often choose to stay silent, believing that understanding others is more important than defending themselves. That silence becomes a pattern. They do not explode or create conflict. They endure, they absorb uncomfortable truths, hold back reactions, and keep giving even when something inside them starts to feel off. It becomes a quiet form of suffering that few people ever notice. On the surface, everything seems calm, but underneath there is a growing tension that has no clear release. Each small disappointment, each ignored boundary, adds another layer to that pressure. Then comes the repetition that slowly changes everything. Betrayal does not always appear in dramatic ways. It shows up in small, consistent moments where trust is chipped away. Broken promises, hidden intentions, subtle disrespect. It happens again and again until patterns become impossible to ignore. The empath begins to connect the dots, and the emotional weight they have been carrying starts to shift into something sharper, something more aware. And without any loud signal or warning, there comes a point where something inside them changes. The breaking point rarely arrives with noise or visible chaos. There is no dramatic outburst, no sudden confrontation that announces a shift. It happens in a way that is almost easy to miss. The exact moment feels quiet, controlled, and deeply internal. On the outside, the empath may look the same, speaking the same way, carrying on with the same routine, yet something inside has already moved into a different place. The constant emotional pressure that once built up without resistance begins to settle into a stillness that feels unfamiliar. In that stillness, their response to people starts to change. They no longer feel the need to explain every feeling or justify every reaction. Words that once came easily now stay unspoken. They stop trying to make others understand what they have been carrying for so long. There is less urgency to fix situations, less desire to repair what keeps breaking. The emotional energy that once flowed outward toward others begins to pull inward, becoming more contained and measured. At the same time, the way they care begins to shift. The care does not disappear, but it no longer looks the same. It becomes selective, guarded, and intentional. They start to notice where their energy goes and how it is received. Where they once gave freely, they now pause. Where they once tolerated, they now observe. This change can feel confusing to those around them, especially to people who were used to their constant presence and support. The empath is still aware of emotions, still able to read the room with precision, yet the way they respond feels different, almost distant. This is where the deeper shift becomes clear. The empath does not lose control in this moment. They gain control in a way that reshapes their entire approach to people and relationships. The overwhelming flood of emotion that once guided their actions begins to quiet down, replaced by a sharper awareness of boundaries and consequences. They begin to choose when to engage, when to step back, and when to remain completely unaffected. The change is subtle in appearance but powerful in effect, creating a version of them that operates with a level of clarity that was not there before. After that quiet shift, the change in behavior becomes more noticeable, even if it is never openly explained. The empath still understands emotions with the same depth as before, yet the way they respond begins to feel different. They are no longer reacting from a place of constant openness. Instead, they move with intention. Every response feels measured. Every reaction feels chosen. The awareness they once used to comfort others starts to serve a new purpose, guiding how they protect their own energy. This is where emotional detachment begins to take shape. It is not a complete absence of feeling, but a controlled distance from it. They feel less of the emotional weight that once overwhelmed them, and in that space, their perception becomes sharper. They start to see patterns more clearly, noticing subtle shifts in tone, body language, and intention without getting pulled into them. Situations that once drained them now feel easier to observe from a distance. There is a quiet strength in that detachment, a sense of calm that replaces the constant emotional noise they used to carry. Along with this shift comes a more strategic way of thinking. The empath becomes highly aware of timing, words, and impact. They know exactly what to say in a given moment, and more importantly, they know when to say nothing at all. Conversations are no longer driven by the need to be understood or to keep peace at any cost. Instead, they are guided by clarity and purpose. They begin to recognize which interactions deserve their attention and which ones do not. This awareness gives them an edge that others may find difficult to read. As this transformation continues, the balance of power quietly shifts. The same sensitivity that once made them vulnerable begins to work in their favor. Their ability to read emotions turns into precision, allowing them to navigate situations with confidence and control. They are still aware of everything happening beneath the surface, but now they decide how much of themselves they allow into it. This creates a presence that feels composed, observant, and difficult to influence in the same way as before. This side feels unsettling mainly because of the contrast it creates. People remember who the empath used to be. They remember the openness, the patience, the way every emotion was met with understanding and warmth. That memory stays in place, and when the shift happens, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. The same person who once responded with softness now carries a calm distance that feels unfamiliar. It is not loud or aggressive, yet it changes the entire dynamic. The absence of that constant emotional availability makes others aware that something has moved beyond their reach. That contrast creates a sense of unpredictability. The empath is no longer reacting in the way people expect. They are no longer driven by the immediate pull of emotion or the need to maintain harmony at any cost. Instead, they are choosing how and when to respond. That choice introduces a level of uncertainty that did not exist before. People who were once comfortable relying on predictable empathy begin to feel unsure about where they stand. The patterns they were used to no longer apply, and that shift can feel difficult to read. There is also a deeper psychological edge that becomes more visible over time. The empath still understands people with the same depth, perhaps even more clearly now that emotions are more controlled. They can recognize intentions, notice inconsistencies, and sense underlying motives with precision. The difference is that they no longer feel obligated to soften those observations or ignore them for the sake of keeping peace. That clarity changes the way they engage in conversations and relationships. Their responses become sharper, more direct, and guided by awareness rather than emotional pressure. This combination of contrast, unpredictability, and heightened perception creates a presence that others may find intense. The empath is no longer easy to influence in the same way, and the emotional access people once had is no longer freely available. Their understanding remains, but it is paired with control, and that balance can feel unfamiliar to those who only knew their earlier nature. There is a truth beneath this transformation that many people fail to recognize at first glance. The shift in the empath does not come from a place of becoming evil or losing their humanity. It is an evolution shaped by experience, pressure, and repeated exposure to situations that demanded more than they could keep giving. They did not become dark without reason. Every change in their behavior carries a history behind it, built from moments where their openness was met with imbalance, where their willingness to understand others was not returned with the same care. As this pattern continues over time, the empath begins to develop a form of protection that was not there before. It does not appear suddenly, and it does not come with clear instructions. It forms gradually as they start to recognize the cost of having no limits. Boundaries that were once unclear begin to take shape, often later than they should have. This delay is what makes the shift feel so intense. When boundaries are learned too late, they tend to come with a stronger sense of control, almost as if the empath is making up for everything that was once overlooked. This protection is not about pushing people away without reason. It is about filtering what is allowed to come close. The empath becomes more selective with their time, their energy, and their emotional investment. They begin to notice where they are valued and where they are simply expected to give. The difference that once went unnoticed becomes clear, and that awareness changes how they engage with others. Their actions are no longer driven by the need to be there for everyone, but by a quieter understanding of what feels right for them. At a deeper level, this version of the empath reflects someone who has reached a point where being used is no longer acceptable. The same awareness that once made them open now helps them recognize imbalance with clarity. They do not lose their ability to understand others, but they no longer allow that understanding to come at their own expense. The transformation carries a message that is often overlooked, one that speaks less about darkness and more about a shift towards self-preservation shaped by everything they have experienced. There is a moment where this shift starts to feel personal, where it stops being about understanding someone else and begins to reflect something within. A quiet question forms beneath the surface, one that does not need to be spoken out loud to be felt clearly. Have you ever felt yourself becoming colder over time, even in situations where you once would have responded with patience and care? It does not always happen in a dramatic way. It shows up in smaller changes, in the way you hold back words, in the way you pause before giving your energy, in the way certain emotions no longer reach you as easily as they once did. That change can feel confusing, even uncomfortable, especially when it seems to go against the person you believed yourself to be. There is an internal conflict that comes with it, a sense that something important has shifted without clear permission. It is not driven by a desire to disconnect or to become distant from others. It grows from repeated moments where giving more of yourself only led to feeling drained or overlooked, not because you wanted to change, but because something in you recognized the need to respond differently. The awareness builds quietly, guiding you toward a different way of handling situations that once felt familiar. As this awareness deepens, the line between emotion and control begins to change. You may notice yourself observing more and reacting less, choosing your responses with a level of care that did not exist before. The instinct to absorb everything softens, replaced by a need to protect your own space. This shift does not erase your ability to understand others. It reshapes how much of that understanding you allow to affect you. The difference is subtle but meaningful, creating a sense of distance that feels both unfamiliar and necessary at the same time. Somewhere within that experience, a different perspective begins to form. The change that once seemed like a loss of warmth starts to reveal another layer. Maybe it is not darkness in the way it first appears. Maybe it is a form of self-protection that developed when nothing else seemed to work. In the end, the image of the empath begins to shift into something far more complex than most people expect. It is no longer just about someone who feels everything deeply or carries the emotions of others without question. There is another side that forms quietly, shaped by experience and awareness, where feeling is no longer the only force guiding their actions. The most dangerous empath is not the one who feels everything without limits, constantly giving and absorbing whatever comes their way. It is the one who has learned to understand those emotions and then decide how much of them truly deserve a response. That decision creates a pause that was never there before, a space between what they sense and how they react. In that space, everything changes. They begin to recognize the difference between what needs their attention and what does not. The instinct to immediately step in, to fix, to carry, begins to fade into something more controlled. It is not a loss of empathy, but a refinement of it. They still see what others feel, still understand what lies beneath the surface, yet they no longer allow every emotion to pull them in the same direction. This shift can feel subtle from the outside, yet it carries a weight that is hard to ignore. The empath becomes someone who chooses when to engage and when to remain still, when to give and when to step back. That ability introduces a level of certainty that was once missing. There is no rush to prove anything, no urgency to explain every reaction. The calm that replaces that urgency creates a presence that feels steady and deliberate. As this transformation settles in, it becomes clear that once this level of awareness is reached, it does not easily reverse. The patterns that were once followed without question are no longer automatic. The understanding remains, but it is paired with control that cannot be undone. Because once an empath learns when to stop, once they experience what it means to hold their energy instead of giving it away without thought, they do not return to who they used to be. So as you think about everything shared in this video, there is one question that stays with you. Do you think this is true, or is it misunderstood? Is this shift something people fail to recognize, or something they choose to ignore? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments because your perspective adds depth to this conversation. If this video connected with you on a deeper level, take a moment to show your support by liking this video. And if you want to explore more content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay connected for more insights that go beyond the surface.